informatics 2B, right? When you're learning, what is this, website development and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot to learn. It's absurd how much studying you have to put in. Oh yeah, we had a diagram, right? So it's pro.io, pro.io, and then open existing diagram. We had a diagram, right? Was it here? Where did I put it? Okay, it's not desktop. So there's the diagram that we're using in the previous video, right? So we're gonna continue from here and explain more in depth input and output. That's the main focus of today's tutorial, input and output. Then I'm gonna use code blocks. Let's wait for it. I'm feeling a bit tired, yo. So we're here. So let me, since you can just check the previous. Okay, I think I can leave some of these comments here. And yeah, we're going to discuss input and output, right? So if you remember in the previous video, we're talking about common output, common input, C in, C out. And we talked about what data type is C in, what data type is C out. So now I hope hopefully you guys really understood the previous session, because we're just going to continue from there, assuming that you understood the previous session. So remember, in the CIN is declared as I stream, where the I stands for input stream, right? But then it's just abbreviated as I to make sure that everything is succinct, right? Meaning everything is just short and sweet. Then we have O stream, C out, right? So this is for console output or common output. This refers to our output stream, hence O stream. So let's talk about input, right? Input is the one that has quite a lot of things to deal with. So input, right? We're going to discuss with input. So input, when you're getting input from the user, right? Remember you say CIN and then you use the stream extraction operator because we're extracting. Look at the direction of the arrows. We're extracting from the input stream to some variable in that direction, to some variable. So we're going to have some variable here. So what's going to happen is that CIN is going to go to the input stream or the buffer. In this case, it's going to be the buffer. Then from the buffer, it travels into the variable. And then the variable stores that information. But during that process of transferring the data, C++ it uses the data type of this variable and they need to match. So for example, if I say CIN and I say, let's say I have some string here, just know that there's some string variable here, right? Let's say str value. That's the string that I'm using to store the value from the user. If you enter something that's not the thing that it expects, it goes into what we call a fail state, right? Meaning the input stream. So fail state, right? Fail state. It means that input stream has failed to extract the the data, right? The data can be whatever the user entered. The data is what the user enters. And I'm using the word data because okay, you learn there's gonna be, if you're majoring in informatics, there's a module. I don't know whether it's informatics 2A. I think it's 2A. Yeah, it's 2A. Where you need to understand the difference between what is data and what is information. Data is raw, it's unprocessed. So the information that the user enters, it's raw information, right? So hence we call it data because it hasn't been processed yet. So I wouldn't advise you to use the information when you're describing. Use the word data. Unless if it's processed and it's grouped and it's in a table, then we can say that's information. In this case, it's raw unprocessed, so it's just data. So the input stream enters a fail state when it failed to extract the data. So what can cause it to fail? What can cause it to fail is when you pass something of a different data type than the variable, than that variable's data type. So here, if you put strings, okay, for strings, it's fine. It accepts all types because a string is very stupid because string, if you pass in a number like this, a string, all it does just simply adds double quotes. If you pass in a Boolean like true, a string simply just adds double quotes. So strings, I wouldn't use them to explain here. I think it's better to use an integer. It's like interval, it's better that way because integer, it expects an integer. If you don't pass it, then the input stream enters what we call a fail state. So when it enters that fail state, what that means, it means that no further input is accepted. That's what it means. That means you cannot enter any more data because it just failed. So when it fails, it just stops there. You are not allowed to enter any more information. So after the input stream has failed or entered a fail state, we need to restore it, right, from that fail state. So restore it from that fail state. And how can we do that? There's functions that we call. Remember, we talked about these variables, right? Cin and cout. They're actually not variables. They are something that we call objects, meaning you can put in the name of the object here, followed by a dot. This dot, it means access. It's to access something from this. And each of those objects, they have functions, just like the functions that you guys have been creating this whole time. Trust me, you learn this in second semester. You'll be able to make your own class, your own objects, basically, that have their own functions. But for now, you guys are still beginners. They won't touch on that. Just wait until second semester. All you need to know is that you put in the name of the object, followed by the name of function, followed by the parenthesis, and then semicolon. And then some functions can return. Remember, they talked about it in class. Some functions can return, meaning they can give you back something. Or some functions can be non-value returning, meaning they don't give you back anything. Basically, they give you void. If you still remember that example of prudence, when you go to ShopRite and your card declines, then they call prudence. They say prudence, void. It's declining. They always say that, right? Void. They use the word void because void means nothing was received. You didn't get back anything. So those functions, those void functions, right? You call them like this because they don't return anything. But if it's a function that returns, right? You put a variable this side and then you say equals to, and then you call that function because that function gives back a value, and then that value we assign it into a variable. So those are the two types of ways to call the function. So here, this function returns void. Remember, void means nothing. I don't want to type to a very long sentence there. That's why I'm keeping it short. This function returns a valid C++ data type. By valid C++ data type, right? I mean an int, a short or float or double or string. String is also a return type, or char or boolean even. There's functions that return all these different data types. You need to know the function. You might ask yourself this question, right? An important question arises. How will I know what the function returns? This is something that we call documentation, which basically is information that's stored on Google about the available objects and functions inside of a specific header file. So there's two ways you can find it. You can use, say, CPP reference like this. You can use that website, CPP reference. I'd advise you to right click here and then pin to make sure you don't lose this website because you're going to refer to it a lot of times. So CPP is very Yeah, I don't like how they did it. You could. The thing is, the websites are very complicated for C++. I don't know, lie to you. So let me check. Let me say standard C++ libraries. Let me check something. What's that website called again? Yeah, there's another one called C++. This one. So there's two, the CPP reference and the C++. I think we can use C++. I think this one is better because you see, it lists the header files. You see, these are all the header files. Majority of them, these are the header files. And it even, yeah, no, this thing is very broad. It also even shows you a list. You see, there's the iStreams the streams that we're talking about. They're part of the iStream header file. Then there's iOS IO stream file. It actually basically includes both cin for inputs and cout for outputs. Then we have a buffer. You can actually create your own buffer and then store data into it. But then that's very advanced. So we will never ever touch on that. And you finish this whole year without touching on that because it's too advanced. That's a personal thing. You have to go and study it on your own. So I'm looking for, let's look at this class. We're looking for input, right? So close, I'm looking for IO stream, right? That's the header file I'm looking for. Seems like I don't say it here. Just give me a sec. IO stream limits iterator chrono. Yeah, like I said, this C++ documentation isn't it doesn't look proper. So I'm gonna just give me a sec while I look for it. Okay, it's not showing you. You can try searching. Let's search IO stream and then press enter. Yeah. So it can sometimes show you sometimes it can show you the things. Yeah. So sometimes if you can't find the header file, right, you can just search it there at the top. But then you have to know the header file. So that's the header file. So, I didn't see. Yeah. Yeah, this thing, like I said, these websites are complicated. You see, you are dealing with something that has to do with input and output. So you click here, right? Then it shows you all the specific files, right? The header files. I want the IO stream. So I'm gonna click IO stream and then boom, it loads. Then you can choose here the C++ version. 90, C++ 98 is a version that was released in 1998. That's very old. You'd want to click on C++ 11, not 1998. That's too old. Then we have all of these objects, right? These are what we call objects because you can call functions from those objects using a dot. And then these ones, you see there's ones with just cin, cout, cr, clog. Then there's ones with that put a that prepend a W. So it puts a W in front of all of them. You don't have to worry about those, right? They'll never touch on this until you finish your degree. So don't worry about that. Leave that section. Then, it doesn't show the functions. If you want to find the functions, right, choose the object. You see, they're telling you that these are all objects, meaning you can call functions. I want to talk about cin, right, which is input. So I'm going to click cin. Then it shows me everything about cin. You can even read more here if you want to. Then okay, that's complicated, this thing. I don't wanna lie. You see, now it's no longer showing functions. It's fine. Just search. It's very complicated, this website. Yeah, just do the search. So after doing the search, you see a lot of information. What do you want, right? You want the section that says public member functions. These ones, especially this section here, where the functions are a lot. You see here, they're a lot. So that's where I'm going to go. Where it says functions, public member functions inherited from this library. So we can have a function called get count, get line, ignore, pig, read, put back, unget, tellg. Like I said, there's a lot. You can't possibly know all of them from your head. So that's why there's documentation, so that if you forget the syntax, you can simply go visit there. So the function that we will talk about, right, is get line, get line, ignore, pick, and put back. Those are the functions we're going to focus mainly on, right? Is there any other functions? Yeah, it's just only those. Yeah. So we can just look at the documentation to understand them. So we're gonna talk about the functions get and then get line. Then we have the peek function. Then we have the put back function. Then we might not fail. We can talk about fail. Then there's good. Then there's bad. These are all the functions we're going to discuss in today's session, right? So get, the function get, right? It gets one character. So its syntax, right? To use it, you say cin that input stream or iStream object, right? Is that iStream object? In this case, we're going to use cin. So iStream object, right? Dot get. Then you pass in the variable here that's going to store that character. Remember, get function, it's called get for a reason, right? In singular, meaning it gets one symbol. So if you entered in your input 123, right? When you call the get function, it's gonna store one, the symbol one, that one character into this variable. So that's how it works. So if you enter A, let's say entered A, it's gonna store A into this variable. Even if you enter the whole sentence or a word like hello, the get function gets only one character, which is the first thing in the buffer. So it gets age. So it's going to store age into this variable. So that's basically how the get function works. And this is how you use it. It's a void function. Remember how we call a void function like this. You don't remember, it returns nothing. You don't put an equal sign because it doesn't give you back anything, that function. You simply just call it. Then we have get line, which is also a void function. It's also a void function. The get line method, right, is a bit unique because let me show you. Even though here, to view more information about the function, you can click on it, right? You can just click on the function get line. You can just click on the function get line, right? Then you see more information. So there's the function. So you see, it tells you that the function expects a char pointer, which is basically a string, and then a stream size, meaning how many characters do you want to store, or how many characters do you want to read. Then there's another one that takes in a char, which is the delim or delimiter, meaning stopping point. Basically, it should stop when it sees, it should stop storing that whole line when it sees this character that we're going to pass. Hence, it's a char. So that character that represents a stopping point is called a delimiting character. You see, delimiting character because it's supposed to limit you on how far you can read from the buffer. So there should be some examples here. Yeah. So this is there's some examples. You see it's part of cin, right? So you can call it from cin and then pass the information. But then you can also pass it without yeah, we can also pass it. They usually give you some examples. You can also pass it without putting cin. Just call getLine method and then it's gonna work. So there's two ways to use that. The thing is, C++ is very broad. Sometimes it might work, sometimes it might not work. So let me show you. So dot get line, right? And then I need to create a string, right? So let me do this. So let me create a string here. String val, I'll just call it val. So I'm gonna store the line that I'm reading from the buffer or from the input stream into this val variable. Then I'm gonna tell the C++ how many characters I want to read. So it to stop when it has read 150 characters. That's basically how I'm going to do it, right? But then sometimes I don't know why C++ does this. Sometimes when you try to, so I have to include the string class. When you try to build this, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, this time around, oh yeah. You see it's showing me an error. So I don't know whether this version that's on there is not no match for this function call. I think this version that's there on that documentation is a bit old. But then if you just simply call getLine like this, now it starts working. So just use the second approach. Okay, let me, yeah, that's working on using the second approach. No match for the blah blah blah. Okay. I don't know whether it wants me to actually put a char array. Let me do that. Let me try doing that. So let me say, you don't have to worry about this now. I'm just trying to test something. You discuss pointers later on. So that's not the issue. So why is it complaining? Oh, let me try something else. I forgot to do this. So let me do that. Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that, but we'll get to that. It's best to call the function. So you can call it this way from cin, right? And you say get line like that. But for I don't know, for some weird reason it doesn't work. So just call it like this, get line like that. And remember, it's a void function, right? So you don't have to put an equal sign in the front of it like this because it doesn't give you back anything. You try doing that, you're gonna get back. Well, it does give you something, but it doesn't return specific information that we need that we can view as valuable. To us, it's not really valuable. As you can see, it returns an iStream by reference. But then for us, we're not really interested into checking what the function returns. So we just want to store. So here you pass in the string, right? Then here you pass in the number of characters, right? Remember, a string is an array of characters, or it's a collection of characters. So that's why you sometimes have to specify exactly how many characters you want to read from the file. Then you're gonna have a delim or delimiter, meaning the getLine function, right? We need to tell it when to stop. So this part over here tells it exactly when to stop. And most of the time, you're gonna stop when you see a backslash. So most of the time, the delimiter will be a backslash n because the backslash n is activated when you press enter on your keyboard. Remember to get input, right? So if I have int val like this, and then I have cin, and then I have that value, right? In order for me to tell C++ that I've entered the information, let's say I enter 123, or I have to press enter on my keyboard. So when you press enter, what happens is that this is what happens. You need to understand this perfectly. This is what happens when you press enter on your keyboard to capture that input. It stores whatever you've entered into the buffer. So let's say you entered these values. Then it appends a backslash n there. So this, when you press enter keyboard, it puts that backslash n there. So that means in your buffer, it's actually stored in this format with that backslash n. So that's why we have to tell it the delimiter or stopping point. What limits us from or what stops us from reading. So when you call the getLine method, it reads one char or one character at a time. So it's gonna read one, stores it, read two, stores it, read three, stores it, read that space because it's also a valid space. Then reads the 50, read the 5, reads the 0. Now 50 has been read. Reads the space, reads. And then it sees the backslash n, and then it says, oh, so that's my stopping point. So it stops right before that delimiter. So it's gonna stop here. Then we have all of this inside that string variable. So that means that string variable will be, this is a string variable, right? It will have the whole line like this copy, and then we have that. So that's how the string will be. And I can demonstrate it in C++. Remember, now we're still talking about the functions. We'll write the code after explaining them. Then we have a pick function. This one returns a char. So it gives you back a char and it's called pick, right? So this is how it's declared, the function. It's declared like this. It allows you to pick, meaning to see what's in the buffer without deleting what's in the buffer. There's a way to check or pick, right? So To do that, you simply need to create a variable called a char variable, right? So ch value, and then you say is equals to cin dot pick. It allows me to see what's in the buffer, so that let's say for example, I want to read a number, right? I can there's another way. Let's say you are getting multiple lines, right? Or I don't know, maybe you're getting multiple characters, right? You're calling the get method. You see this get method. You're getting one character at a time. But before you get the character, you need to check if that character is a number. So you can use peek, and then you call peek, and then you check the data type if you check the value of that char. You call is number. Remember, we have the function in the function those functions is lower, is up, those functions, right? We from CC type header file, we have those functions. I think there is a function that you can use to check if it's a number, if a char is a number. So that's most of the time where it's going to be useful, this function. But then just remember it returns a char. So you need to always store that whatever it gives you back into a variable. Then we have put back. As the name implies, it means put it back. So you can call get. Remember, get gets us that one character. After it gets it, right? Remember when you call get, let's say you call get on this input here. What's going to happen is that that variable char ch value will now store the first symbol like this. Let's say it's 1. Then it removes it, it deletes it from the buffer. Then we are left with these values. Then the next time you call get method again, it's going to read only 2 and then delete it. So as you can see, we're deleting what's inside our buffer or input stream. So what if you want to put it back? So you can use put back. I know it's weird, but yeah, you can use put back. So cin dot put back, then you pass in the char that you want to put back into the buffer. You pass it here inside the function. And it's a void function, just like the get function. Then we fail. It's also it's not a void function per se. It's not okay. Let me explain something, right? These functions that I say void, they're not necessarily void. They just return some information that we do not want to use, or that we do not need, or that we don't deem as necessary. So if it's not necessary information, we simply don't store it. But then they don't necessarily return void. But I want you to picture it in that way because 100% of the time you're not going to care about what this function returns. So that just keep that in mind. Then we have what is this? We have fail. It means that our input stream has failed, right? Meaning that it has entered a fail state, right? We call this a fail state. So that means in a way that would mean that our input stream is now bad, right? Bad and fail, they can be used interchangeably in a way. Bad and fail in a way. So we have here to use it, just say cin dot fail, and it takes in no parameters, right? You just say cin dot fail, meaning that the cin or the input stream has failed. If it has failed, then do something to respond to that. Then we have good, meaning that input stream is good. Simply that, there's nothing more to it. So just say it's good. You just call the good function like that. Then we have the bad function, input stream is bad, right? Meaning something is bad or something went wrong. So is bad, we call it like that. So this would be the list of the functions. I think I should make a text file for this. I should save this text file and then share it on you in the group. But I don't see the point, but it's fine. Some people like you to share things, but all of the things that I'm getting it from this website. They're all there. You just need to find the right function you're looking for. Oh, there's ignore. Before I forget, I forgot to ignore. Ignore, right? The last function is ignore. So ignore, you use it in this way. You say cin dot ignore. It's also like a void function, right? It's also like a void function. So where did I declare it now? Oh, it's here. So ignore, You tell C++ that you want to ignore. You usually use ignore when the buffer or the input stream has entered a fail state. Basically, you've gotten the wrong input. That's when you use ignore. Because what happens is that if you have this in the buffer and you're expecting this first number to be H or a char or something, and then it failed. That means we no longer the C++ no longer accepts input. And that means this in the buffer is still there. The wrong input is still there. So that means if you try to read again, it's gonna go into a fail state again. So that's why we need the ignore function, which does what? It deletes all these characters. It basically deletes everything in the buffer. So it leaves it empty, even including the \n. So it's gonna leave it empty like this, so that the user has another chance to enter the correct value. That's what the ignore function does. It removes or deletes everything in the buffer. But then not necessarily everything, right? there's certain limits, right? You need to understand how the function works. Here you pass in the number of characters to delete, right? That's the first parameter for this function. You pass in the number of characters you want to delete from the buffer. Then here you're gonna put in a delim, right? Which is the delimiter stopping point, meaning it should stop when it sees this character. It should stop deleting when it sees that character. So basically, if I said the character is \n, it's gonna go into my buffer, and then it's going to delete one character at a time, and then it sees, oh, this is the \n, then it knows, oh, then I'm done. Then boom, it knows that it's done. So it should stop at exactly \n. And remember that \n is added or appended to your input the moment you press enter on your keyboard. So it gets stored into the buffer. Cin.ignore. Then we have, I keep forgetting. Like I said, there's a lot of functions. I can't possibly remember all of them. There's this one, clear. Remember, we said that the buffer enters a fail state, right? Meaning that there's no more input accepted. To put it back to the way it was, right, you'd have to call the clear method. So the clear method, all its purpose is to restore the stream to basically to a good state. Just know it's in that, just know it returns it into a good state. Meaning we can accept more input. So this it will allow the user to enter more input. Because after it goes into a failed state, it blocks the user from entering further input. Just like when you go to a website and you keep putting the wrong password or the wrong details, what happens? It blocks you, right, from that website. So in order for them to clear you and put you back to the way it was normally, so that you are able to enter your data again, you call the clear method. So that's what it does. So you say cin.clear. And you simply call it like that. It's a void function, not necessarily a void. Remember, all these functions are not necessarily void. They usually return like being a number of bytes read or input stream size, all those things, which is information that's not necessary to us. Remember, a function that returns something, even though it returns something, there's two ways of calling it. You can say like this, and then you put in the variable the side, right? This is the first way. That means you want to use the number that gets returned by that function. Or you can just simply ignore that number by pretending it's a void function. So most of the time, we're going to pretend they're all void functions. The ones that return information that we do not need, right? So I hope this makes a lot of sense now. So there's a lot to demonstrate. So let's start by something basic, right? Let me see what input can I ask the user to enter. So yeah, let's say we're expecting the user to enter a specific character, right? So let's say what is this? Should I say character or a number? I think we should use a number. Let's try to use a number because C++ is very sensitive if you mix the types. So let's say it expects you to enter a number, right? And then I'm going to initialize the number to 0. Remember, this is another way of initializing. So I think I did explain that. Yeah, in some other video, I think I did explain that. But we'll talk about it more in the lecture or the session for data types and variables, which will be the session after this. So I want to get a number, right? So I'm gonna say cin like this and then number. Remember the direction of the arrows. They tell you in which order a thing's going to go in. I'm going to enter and then it's going to be stored. The input is going to travel via input stream. Then it's going to be redirected or sent to this direction of this variable. But the user can enter something that's not a number. What if the user enters X? That's not a number. So what happens is that the input stream enters a fail state, meaning it failed to do the right thing. So let me explain a bit about what happens here. So when you get a number, let's say entered X, cin, right, it tries to cast that value to a number. So it tries to say int cast X to an int before storing it into the variable number. So it goes in that direction. That's why I said it's important for C++ for the compiler to know the data type of this variable over here, because it's going to try and cast what you've entered into an int. But is X an int? No, it's not. It's a char. So it's X. So C++ is going to be like, yeah, that's wrong. And then to show you how useless the computer can be, it's going to say, that's wrong. Then it enters a fail state. Then it prevents you from entering any further information or any further input. So you'd have to handle that case. So I'm going to delete this and then build and run. Let's enter X. It looks like it worked, but it didn't actually work. That's the thing about C++. Let's try to output. I think, let me see. That's the thing about C++. C++ is very unpredictable. I'm sure you should notice a lot of times Dr. Stung, when he's explaining this, sometimes something that he expects to happen doesn't happen. And then something that he expects not to happen happens. So C++ is like that. It's unpredictable. So let's say I enter a question mark. You see, it did fail because it's still showing 0. You see, if I go down here, this is the 0 that I initialized number to. That means it failed to store the number here, because a question mark is not a number. So you'd have to check. So let's check. Immediately before we display the number, right? So let me do a simple check. Let me do an if statement. So if, and then I put in my condition here, which is something that's going to return true or false. If my cin has failed, so dot fail, right? Then I should output an error message and say input stream has entered a fail state. And then I just put the \n there. Remember, \n is another way to say end line. There's multiple ways to do certain things in C++. So I'm going to try to build and run. Let's enter a question mark, right? You see, boom. Now it outputs an error that the input stream has entered a fail state, meaning it failed because it failed to convert this to a number. That's not a number. So that's how you'd use the fail function. You'd put it in a condition, because the fail function, in a way, you can, like I said, these functions don't necessarily return return void. They return the iStream. As you can see, it returns no, it's not. Let me go over this. Oh yeah, this one returns Boolean, yeah. It returns true or false. So it returns true if the input stream has entered a fail state. If it has, then it's going to fail, and then that means you can't enter any further input. And that means our buffer, the information that's in our buffer, is corrupted. It's in the incorrect format. So we need to clear or delete or remove all that information. But you'll notice something here, right? Let me show you. Let's test it out so that you see that you can't enter any further input. So let me do this and say cin again. I'm going to check if my input stream has entered a fail state, then I'll put an error. Then I try to get the input again. But remember that in my buffer, I'll still have that question mark. So it's going to try to read the same question mark again, which means it's going to fail again, which means that this thing is going to keep failing until, and I don't know until when, infinite number of times. So question mark, enter. It even but then I guess I guess you can see it now. Do you see this? I hope you can see the thing that I was talking about. See, I entered question mark, and we did talk about fail state. When it enters a fail state, it blocks any further input. After entering question mark, it was supposed to give me another option to enter input again, right? But it blocked me. So this means this was ignored entirely. So in order for me to get input again, I would have to fix the issue, those errors. So how do you fix that? But before we get into that, I want you to notice something here. If you use, I feel like you start to understand why we use a while loop. If you use an if statement like this, remember an if statement checks once. What if in here, right, you use the clear method, then you remove what's in the buffer using the ignore method, then you try again to get input. Remember, this checks it once. If statement checks once, it does the check once. What if even here they enter another spiritual number, which is an incorrect input? That means it enters fail state again. So you have to actually use a while loop so that while, meaning as long as the user keeps on failing or entering incorrect input, keep on asking them for new input until they enter the right thing. We won't stop until they enter the right thing. So that's the problem with if statements. It limits you. So we've entered a fail state, right? So let's restore it. So clear method, we're restoring it from the fail state into the good state, right? So that it can accept more input. But remember what I said, we need to clear or delete what's in the buffer because what's in the buffer is still that question mark. So it's gonna fail again if we try. So we want to delete it like this so that we try inserting different input into the buffer. So let's try to do it. Let's not delete the information. Let's not use ignore functions so that you see that I'm not lying, that it's gonna enter a fail state. So I'm gonna say number, but it won't output an error because, like I said, this is an if statement. It's not a while loop. If it was a while loop, it was going to output the error again for the second time. So I'm gonna enter question mark, enter the fail state, but it was supposed to actually output another error there. So let me just use a while loop so that it keeps on outputting the error. So I'm gonna enter question mark. You see, it's gonna keep failing. Why is it keep failing? You see that it doesn't allow me to enter more input because when the input stream enters a fail state, it blocks any further input. So you have to delete from that input stream until if you don't delete, you see the errors that I'm getting. And you see it's running infinite number of times because it's inside a while loop. So I would have to ignore, meaning clear what's in the buffer. So I need to call the ignore method. So cin.ignore, right? Then you're gonna ignore 200. Let's say we can ignore a maximum of 200 characters. And then it should stop deleting when it sees that \n. That's our delimiter. So the way ignore function works, right? What if you have characters or symbols inside the buffer that are less than 200? Well, it deletes everything. That means this gets triggered. Yeah, that means this will get triggered first. But if you have characters that are more than 200, that means it's going to look for this as a stopping point. So it chooses one of these inputs as a stopping point in a way. So you need to understand that very well. So if you have less than 200 characters, that means it's going to stop at that last number. So let's say I have three characters in here. So it's going to see 1, 2, 3, and then it checks here. It sees, let's say for example, it sees, oh, there's a \n there. So that means it's going to stop when it sees that \n. That means this whole 200 characters were ignored. But then if you have more than 200 characters, that means it's gonna update this number to be whatever maximum number of characters you have in the buffer. Basically, it's gonna wait until it sees this. if you happen to have more than these 200 characters in the buffer. 200 is a random number. That's the random number they choose, right? In the textbook, that's the number I think the textbook they use 200 or 100. One of those is fine. But if you want to delete like the maximum, there's a way to do that. But that's very advanced. Basically, you have to delete everything in the buffer. Like everything in the buffer. You see that this function expects something of type stream size, right? So you could use, there's something called limits, right? So you say limits like this, and then you pass in the stream size, blah, 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 and then you call the max function. I don't want to teach you that method. Don't ever use that method. Even if, just because Dr. Stung uses it, it doesn't mean you should use it. He learned it after when he was done with C++ or ComSci 1P. That's when he learned that method. So don't use that. Just because he's using it, it doesn't mean you should use it. You are beginners, you're not him. He's him, you're not him. Just always remember that. Use what feels right to you, what's easy for you. Because if you try to cram those things, what if you make a mistake and you say stream size and then you say limits? You see, now you're mixing them, you swap them around, error, and you'll never ever figure out what's wrong because you crammed, you wrote something you don't understand. So that's why I advise you to put a physical number at 200. It will still clear the whole buffer. Like I said, if in the buffer there happens to be more than 200 letters, right, or characters, that means it's going to delete everything until it sees this symbol as a stopping point. So even if you have 500,000, it's going to delete all 500,000 characters as long as it hasn't seen the symbol. So both methods do exactly the same way, the same thing. The second approach of using limits is to be precise. It's like you're a perfectionist. It's for people who are perfectionists. But either way, it'll still delete everything in the buffer. So here it clears the buffer. So whatever is all that junk in the buffer, because if you try to read input again, we still have an incorrect value, that's question mark. So we need to delete everything in the buffer so that we can enter the next input. And this is a while loop. So it'll execute all of this, then it reaches here, and then it goes back to the top. It checks, is my input stream entered the fail state again? If it has, output an error message again until you enter the right thing. That's the beauty of a while loop. So if I try to enter a question mark, boom, enter the fail state. But you see, it now allows me to get the next input because I know the steps to fix my input stream. Is number one, to clear, meaning to restore it back into a good state. From fail state to a good state. I've restored it, right? Using the clear method. Then number two is to delete everything that's in the buffer, because if you leave everything that's in the buffer, it's going to try to read the question mark again, which means it's going to enter fail state again. Then it tries to read it again, which is a question mark. Then it's going to enter fail state again. So that means it will never ever work. So that's why we need to delete what's in the buffer. Then let's say you entered an N sign, still failed. But then let's say you enter something that looks like a number now. Enter, you see, stops. Because now you've provided the right input. That means it didn't fail when it was casting to an int. So I hope this makes a lot of sense now. So when you enter 10, remember we entered 10 into the input stream, right? So there's that 10. Then it tried to cast it to an int. And 10 is an integer. So it managed to store it inside number. So that's why we didn't enter fail state. Then this loop exited. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. Then this is, okay, I'm just going to say cout, enter a number to make our input look better, look a bit prettier. Then here, before I get the number, I output again, please enter a number. I'm going to share this code. It's fine. I'll send it in the group. So this is the input, right? So let's learn the other functions. Abo, peek, put back, ignore, all those functions. Can you please mute? So we're gonna talk about the other functions, peek, ignore. We did talk about ignore, peek, put back, get line, yeah, we can demonstrate one thing at a time, right? So here I'm going to say demonstrate the functions pick and put back, right? Let me see, pick, put back, and get. They usually go together. Those functions pick, peek to peek what's inside the stream, to just take a peek, right? It's like, for example, I give you something and I say, take a peek. I mean, I'm just saying, look, but don't touch, don't get it, just look. It's like peeking, when you use peek, it's like you're just window shopping. When you're passing by the you for guys out there, when you're passing by the car dealership, and they usually put windows, and then the cars are protected by windows, but you can see the car. So imagine you're a guy there and you're passing by, and then you see that you see a Ferrari there, and you're like, yo, that's my dream car. You're just window shopping, you're just peeking. You're not getting it. You're just peeking. So just remember that. It doesn't remove what's in the buffer. It's just to take a peek to see what's in the buffer. And then get, it means to delete one thing from the buffer, to get one thing, and that one thing is a char. Then put back, you can put it back after getting it. It's like, for example, when you go to a car dealership and they say you can take it for a test drive. So you are getting that car, but then once you're done, you're putting it back in that garage because it's not yours. So to kind of view them in that way, right? So let's say you want to get some value, right? I'm gonna call it char value. Then I'm gonna initialize it to a null, right? Meaning nothing. Null in for chars, right? It's equivalent to saying 0 for integers, meaning there's nothing in that variable. This means null or nothing in the variable. Null or nothing in the variable. If you're doing informatics, right, you can use the nothing keyword to say a variable is nothing. So that's why I'm saying nothing there. So there's the value. So what I can get from the buffer, right? I can extract from the buffer. So let's try to let's try to pick and get, and then after getting, we put it back. So let's try to pick, right? So I'm gonna say C. Okay, I can put it in its own variable, right? So ch value, because remember the pick function returns something. So cin dot pick, meaning I just want to see what's in the buffer. I just want to take a peek, but it doesn't delete what's in the buffer. To show you that it doesn't delete, right, I'm going to try to extract the char value from the buffer after picking. So here I'm going to say cout picking resulted in this value, right? Then we output that value, which is ch value. Then we output an end of line character. Right? So we're just going to take a peek. We're not going to delete, but just take a peek. But then before we can take a peek, I think peek is the last function that we can demonstrate. I'm thinking about it. You can't take a peek if there's nothing in the buffer. I hope that makes sense. Because remember this previous line of code, this one we were testing fail function, ignore, and clear methods. This approach gets one number, and then remember when you get a number, when you use cin like this, it removes that number from the buffer. So that means when we are done with this line of code, with these lines of code, the buffer becomes empty because we got the number, so there's nothing in the buffer yet. So we have to call the get method again to remember you can get a char in one of two ways, right? You can still use the normal way like this, and then this will just store and get one value, right? But then there is a get method, so I'd advise using the get method because it's there for a reason. So cin.get. So we go into our input stream, which goes to our buffer to get one char, one value, then put it inside this variable that we've passed in there. Then now we can cout and say value entered is, then cout that value that the user's entered. Right? But then I can't use this code yet. Let me delete this. I can't use peak because remember, after we've entered the buffer, we've entered something more into the buffer. Get function, remember, it gets that thing from the buffer. That means the buffer becomes empty again. So in order for it to not be empty, I'd have to call the putback method. So because or else it's going to enter a fail state. If you try to peek on an empty buffer, it should enter some fail state. So let's say we enter a correct number 12. And then something went wrong, right? I'm sure you can see that something went wrong. Yeah, C++ is very unpredictable. That's C++. So let's try to do this. Let's try to clear the buffer, right? For the next input. Oh, okay. I think maybe the get function works a bit different. I'll use the get function again. Let me test something first. Yeah, C++ is very unpredictable. So yeah, it seems like if we call the get function, so the get function assumes that something is already in the buffer. That's his problem, the get function. It assumes something's already in the buffer. So if there's nothing, that means you can't call the get method. So you have to use this approach, this method. But we can bypass that by doing this, right? So remember, putting something into the buffer, it's terminated the moment you press enter. So what I can do, right? I can trick it. I think it's smart. I can trick it. I can enter actually two inputs here, and I say 12, enter. Then I say the character A. So these two things will be stored in the buffer. Then it's going to go line by line looking for cin statements. Then it sees the first cin statement. Oh, you want a number, your int. It knows that's int type. Then it reads this first 12, and then it removes it from the buffer. Then it scrolls down, it says, oh, you're trying to get some char. So that means one character. Then it says, oh, there is a char there already in the buffer. Yeah, so C++ is very complicated in that sense. So press enter. Yeah, okay, it clearly doesn't want to behave. That should have worked. I guess get function is refusing to work today. So let's just put back that same method because it was supposed to put it into the buffer, that character A. Let's try again. So I'm going to build and run. Then I'm going to say 12, enter. Then I'm going to enter K. Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with get function. It should be working. Or maybe it's a different C++ version. I don't know. C++ is like that. It's unpredictable. But there is a get function. I don't know why it's refusing to work because I did put something into my buffer. So it is supposed to work. So yeah, I don't know what was that about, but you can use a get function. Just go practice. That's why it's important to read the textbook and practice. So let's just use this method if you're getting a chart to keep your life easy or simple, because you see now that when you use get, it's not behaving. So there's that get function. So here, in a way, this one it's going to indirectly call the get function. Just no, it's going to indirectly call the get function. So if we've called the get function, that means there's nothing in our buffer yet, right? So, and I've stored it inside this variable called value. So I can put it back using the putback method. So I'm gonna do this. Then okay, here let's demonstrate get function. And then here demonstrate. I don't know why it's not working, to be honest. I don't know whether it's code blocks or what, but it should have worked. The get function should have worked. So I'm gonna put it back, right? So I'm gonna say cin dot put back, meaning put it back. You're just borrowing that value. And we've stored it inside the variable called value, right? Now we are putting it back into the buffer. So if this was our buffer, remember our buffer was like this, right? Our buffer was like this. We had 12 and A, right? Then int the number variable extracted 12. Then we left with only A in our buffer. Then the next line had cin value, which means that value stored the character A, right? It means the value stored the character A. So that means our buffer is just now empty. But then we can put it back by calling put back method to put back A. Why am I putting it back? Because I want to peek. Because if I call peek method and there's nothing in the buffer, it won't be able to peek or take a peek, right? So that's why I'm calling the put back method. So put it back into the buffer. Then I'm gonna try to peek. So demonstrate peek method, right? So I need to I'm gonna call it peek. I need to store that value that I've peeked because that function returns something. So dot peek, it returns that char that we're trying to peek. Then I'm gonna say cout peek value. The value that we're peeking is in the variable peek, and then end line to end that line. Then I'm going to build and run. Then let's test it out. Let's see if it works. So 12, and then I'm gonna enter K. Yeah, it works perfectly fine. So you see, I entered K first, right? When I entered K, when it reached this line, right, there was nothing in the buffer. Then I called put back to put back that K value so that I can peek it and take a peek. To show you that it's still in the buffer, right, I can try to read again after peek, and you see that it's gonna execute. So if I say again, I'm gonna call the variable again, initialize it to null. I'm gonna try to read again, right? So cin, and then I'm gonna put it inside again. Then I'm gonna say cout again. I'm just gonna call it again because I'm reading the value again. You see that it's not gonna show me an option to enter a value, but it is gonna display because you see how cin works, right? Let's look at cin. Cin looks for what's in the buffer. If there's nothing in the buffer, then it asks you to enter something. If something's already there, it's going to just extract it. That's weird. That's very weird. It's very weird, right? That's how C++ operates. Remember, we used put back. So the buffer currently has something. So when it gets to this line, it's not going to ask me to enter the value. It's just going to extract it from the buffer, which is K in this example. Then it's just going to cout K. Then you don't be shocked when we get to this part, I won't be prompted or asked to enter anything. According to you guys, right, to your knowledge, you would assume that it's going to ask me 1, 2, 3. So you're gonna assume it's gonna ask you to enter something 3 times. Well, the answer is no. It's gonna ask you twice. So I'm gonna enter. You can actually even prevent it to asking you twice than just asking once. I'm gonna show you. Remember what I said? C++ keeps on reading until you press enter, and then it stores everything right before you press enter. It stores that whole thing into the buffer. So if I press enter here, right, it's not even going to ask me for the second input, which is that char value. It won't ask me because this will already be in the buffer. C++ is very weird in that sense. You need to really understand how it works. So I press enter. You see, boom. It didn't even ask me to enter a value. But all of a sudden, it's displaying A's everywhere. So you see, C++ is very weird. And it will still work even if I run it again, right? And I just enter 12 and then I press enter. Now it's asking me for the next thing. Now it's being polite. It's asking. Then I press K, right? You would assume that it's going to ask me the third time. No, because we use put back method. Remember put back? It puts it back into the buffer. So I press enter. It simply just displays the values. And you see again works because I did put it back that value and it's still K because it's K that I told it to put back. You see the put back method, right? What value is it putting it back? The value stored inside the value variable, of which that value variable is the one here that reads K. So that means I told it to put the value K back into the buffer. So I hope this makes a lot of sense. Like I said, input and output is very complicated. So there's a lot going on there. And then let's explain getLine, and then we'll be done. I would love to talk about you see this part, right? I'll give you as homework. Go find out this part, or just read the textbook on this part, good and bad, or read the documentation. These two functions, that's your homework. Go figure that part out. So where's this? Did they put it here? or not. They didn't put it, but there's supposed to be a function called good and bad. They didn't put it here. Yeah, there's also, you see that there's a lot. Oh, there's the good function and bad. So you see, I'm not lying. There's the good function. It checks whether the state of the stream is good. And then bad checks if whether the bad bit is set. And then this one checks if the fail bit or bad bit is set. So remember what I told you, fail and bad, they operate in the same way. It's similar. So let's try to prove that, right? Let's change this to bad, right? So let's say dot bad. It's going to return true or false if our input stream is bad. And then we try to enter something that's not a number. So let's say t, right? You see that this with bad, it doesn't, you see bad is not working properly because it just simply stops. But it's somewhat similar, but just use fail, but it's somewhat similar. Just take note of that. It's somewhat similar. It's not the same, but it's somewhat similar. So just use fail. Fail works, as you can see, fail works better. And then set error state flag. You see, there's the clear method, and then there's other methods, unsetf, what. The unsetf, right? You see this function here called unsetf is to undo something. That's when you want to undo something. But we're not gonna talk on that. So let's use getLine, right? Let's do getLine. So getLine, right? So here we are demonstrating getLine function. So let's try to get a line, right? So we need to use a string to get that line. Then when I initialize the string to just an empty string, there's nothing in there. Then I'm gonna say get line. Then I pass the string that's gonna store the line, comma. Um, yeah, what about, am I using it right? It's supposed to be get line, and then there's supposed to be some delimiter. Let me just double check the documentation. Yeah, I've been teaching a lot of modules. It's kind of annoying. You forget things. So you get line and then you pass in the input stream size. Basically, how many characters are trying to read, right? Then there's two methods, there's two get lines, right? We have one whereby you pass in the string and the size, meaning the maximum number of characters you want to store. Then you have the one that takes in those two first parameters and the delimiter, meaning stopping point. So I'm gonna say 200 and then stops when it sees that \n, right? Then we try to output that line that we've read from the file. As if it would work. I feel like something is missing here. Yeah, I feel like something is. Let me see, get line. Let me try this. Let me try this instead. I want to check something. Steve fails. Did I set my compiler settings? Let me check something here. This should have worked perfectly fine. Compiler. Yeah, I didn't set my compiler. So let me say C++ 17, the 2017 one. So I think now it should work. So 200 \n. Okay, let's call the one from C in. Let's see if that'll work then. Why is the getLine function totally refusing? Okay, let me double check something. Yeah, so cin.getLine, right, takes in a char type. A chart, oh, there's two. There's one that takes in a chart type and the stream size. Then there's one that takes in a chart type, stream size, and the delimiter. Yeah, I am calling the function okay. I don't know what's going on. I am calling the function the right way. Get line. Oh, it wants me the string stream. Maybe I think that's what it wants. Well, and then you put it. Wait, from the string stream. I think you're supposed to use string stream if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you can ask a question, or maybe you remember the function that how it's used.
So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think with the get line, you're supposed to say get line and then scene and then comma and then the line, like the name of our string.
Thanks. I remember now. I remember. You're supposed to specify which stream are you reading from as the first parameter, and then the string that's going to store the line, and then a delimiter. Thank you so much. Yeah, I remember now. It's the stream that you're gonna read it from. I'm reading from input stream. Then I'm storing it into the string called line, and then the delimiter or the stopping point is going to be \n. Yeah, totally forgot about that. Now it should work fine. Yeah. So I'm going to test the first two parts, right? You enter a number and then you enter a char value. So I'm going to go up here. Let me double check something here. So here I'm going to say cout enter a char or a character, right? So that the input looks friendly, right? Yeah. And then even here you can, okay, you don't have to enter the character again because we're testing pick and put back, so that's fine. So 12, enter character A, and then there's the characters, right? And then it was supposed to prompt me to get a line, and it didn't. Yeah, we have a problem. So let me close this. Or let me try to call the one from cin. Let's see. But I know cin is already there, so I don't know what's going on with C++. C++ is very annoying. It's really frustrating. So let me say cin.ignore. Let's try to clear the buffer. Maybe it wants me to clear the buffer. If I don't know, I don't think you've noticed in the practicals that you guys were doing. You're actually supposed to clean or clear the buffer a lot of times. Yeah, you're supposed to clear the buffer a lot of times. So let's see if clearing the buffer does help. So 12A, yeah, you see it helps to clear the buffer. So yeah, so that means yeah, it's weird. It's weird, right? I know it's very weird because in the buffer we had, remember we had 12 or let's say 10, whatever the number we entered, NA and that \n. And then we've read 10, and then we're left with A, right? And there's \n. Then we read A, right? Then we put it back by calling put back method. Then we read A again. And then I guess we're most probably left with this in there. So we're supposed to remove it from the buffer. Oh, yeah. And the buffers. I'm actually starting to, I just had an epiphany now. I'm starting to understand the buffer a bit better. The buffer is messed up, to be honest. You see why you see why it was all showing an empty line. Remember, we said it should read the whole line until it sees this delimiter. The delimiter is already there in the buffer. So if you check before the delimiter, there's nothing. So that means line was really nothing. So that's why I had to clear even that \n from the buffer first, like this. Then it was going to read the whole line. So be very careful of that. So if you had gotten input in the previous lines, make sure you clear the buffer first because it's going to have that \n. And remember the \n, we are using it as our delimiter or stopping point. So if it's already there like this, it's going to try to read everything before the \n, which is nothing. So that's why it was showing nothing to the output. So it's actually not wrong. C++ wasn't doing anything wrong. I just didn't understand my buffer. So let me run it once more. There's also still output. Remember this class, when we talked about input. You see how much C++ is? It's a lot. So we still have to go to output and talk about only output, how to output stuff. So enter a number, let's say 13, then you enter X, and then you see now it allows me to enter a line. So I'm going to say, hello, this is Cortex Academy 2025. Let's see if it read the whole line, right? So press enter, magic, it read the whole line. So instead of reading more bits of pieces of the buffer, it reads the whole line, right? So just keep that in mind. And you should also be careful. Remember, if you've noticed, we were getting issues, right, with trying to read from the buffer before clearing the buffer. So we need to call the ignore method. Remember, when I say clear, right, I know I'm talking about the there's a function called clear that's similar to the word I'm referring to, which is clear. I don't mean clear the function. I don't mean that clear function. No. I mean clear, which means to clean the buffer. To clean the buffer, use the ignore method. So don't get confused. Don't think I mean the clear method when I say clear the buffer. To clear the buffer, we call the ignore method. And then if you want to, so this is the last thing I'm going to show you, and then the session is over. I'm just going to show you a different way to set the limit here. You can, I don't, even me, right? Okay, let me test this limits. How come it's not auto complete? Yeah, but if you remember the class, you just go check. I don't know. It's code blocks says this thing of not allowing me to not auto complete some things. So this is the second syntax, right? To specify to delete everything, meaning the maximum of the buffer, everything in the buffer, that whole buffer should be cleaned out properly. This is the other way to do it. So you say limits, and then you specify what size are you trying to specify? It's a stream size. Because if you check ignore function, why are we using stream size? Because look at the ignore function. It expects a stream size, meaning how big is the stream. So you just say the maximum size of the stream size. So this should work, right? Let me try to build. It didn't work. Yeah, you can just double check on your. I just say using namespace standard. I don't know. I've never used this method, to be honest. That's why I've only seen it online. Yeah, I've only seen it online, so I don't advise using that method. But you can use it if you feel like you're strong enough. So that's it for today's class. So this is everything that has to do with input, right? Just be very careful with clearing the buffer, because if you don't clear the buffer, you might not be able to get the next available input. So yeah, this is a very important note or thing to take note of. So that's it for today's session. See you in the next one. I'll take questions after class, right? So let me stop recording. Then if you guys have any questions, you can ask.